So welcome to this webinar presented by the IET's Anglian Coastal Local Network, which represents members in Norfolk and Suffolk. And welcome also to folks from other parts of the UK and indeed globally. I'm delighted to welcome you all. I'm Kevin Foster and I'm chairman of the Anglian Coastal IET Local Network, and I will be your host for this evening. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker, Barbara Roberts. During her career in IT, Barbara has seen a lot of change, both good and bad. She helped to create the first of the Agile approaches in 1994 based on UK industry best practice, and since then has coached many organizations through agile transformations and business change in all sectors of the industry. Her focus at the moment is helping complex corporate organizations adapt to 21st century world. Creation of the Agile project management was her original idea, and since its launch in 2010, it has over 100,000 successful exam candidates. Barbara is a regular speaker at conferences and events across the globe, mostly recently running masterclasses in Australia, Singapore, and Kuala Lumpur. Barbara is known for her pragmatic, common sense, and not too serious approach. In this webinar, her second given to the IET on Agile, Barbara will explore Agile from a people point of view. So Barbara, over to you.
Good evening, everybody, and it's lovely to come back and talk about Agile again. This is always of great interest because when you hear people talking about Agile, they often talk about the tools, the technology, and they'll tell you you need a particular tool if you're doing Agile. What I like talking about and what's really important, I think, to Agile is the people aspect. So this presentation it's all about the people. I won't leave this up for long because I hate this slide. But basically, my day job, when I had a day job, when it was normal world, I work with complex corporates to help run agile transformations. And the whole focus of my job when I'm doing these transformations is bringing on the people, developing the people, and my aim is to make myself redundant. I always explain that when I start a transformation gig, that I'm here to give you the knowledge and the skills to develop you as people so that you don't need me. So the success of a transformation is not about how people follow the processes, it's about the behaviors and the development of the people that work in the organization. So the agenda for this session, I'm going to talk about people at the heart of success for Agile, talk about the Agile values, talk a little bit about empowerment, why you do it and how you do it. One of the things that is becoming more and more interesting, a lot of interest in things like Agile leadership, talking about the organizational impact of different behaviors, of how things change when you start to behave differently, and also the impact of transparency, which is one of the three key pillars of Agile. Hopefully, some of you will be familiar with the Agile Manifesto. As written originally, it talked about uncovering better ways of developing software. Most of us change that these days, and we talk about developing solutions, because a lot of the Agile work I do is nothing to do with IT. It's more to do with changing the processes, changing the way people work. But the important thing with the Agile Manifesto is the first line of the manifesto talks about we value individuals and interactions above processes and tools. In other words, what that's saying is that although processes and tools are important, the most important thing, the main focus is on the people. So we don't want the people being constrained by the processes and tools. We want them to be supported by them. What you don't want is people that just blindly follow a process, regardless of whether it makes sense, whether it's the right thing to do. So the focus here is on the individuals and interactions. So for Agile to be successful, we rely on developing people to be the best they can possibly be. And what I find interesting in my job is quite often you find people who are deemed average, and they turn out to be absolute superstars because they're given an opportunity to excel in an area that's not something they're used to. For Agile to be successful, we need to develop good relationships within the organization. And again, quite often I'll go in and you find that the organisational relationships are quite dysfunctional. We need to build effective teams because the value of an effective team far outweighs the total of the individuals separately. And finally, we need facilitative leadership. So these are all things that are based around the Agile values and behaviours. And this is what this presentation is going to focus on. So Agile values are absolutely fundamental to building high-performing teams. So if you look at the values one by one, the first value is courage. And courage is basically not about always taking the easy option. I quite like this slide. It's quite fun. Again, most of us that have worked in complex corporate organizations have had that experience of being that lemming that's suggesting that we're not convinced that the way everybody is going is the right way to go, but it takes a lot of courage to stand up against the flow of the way things are done. And in Agile, we need courage for some of these collaborative practices. So things like estimating, having the courage to put your estimate forward and justify why you think this amount of time or money is needed. Collaborative planning and reporting and retrospectives. All of these things rely very, very much on courage. So that's one of the values that is key to Agile. We don't want people that just say yes. I don't want people that just agree with me. When I'm running transformations, I say I want people to challenge me. Because if I suggest something that doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't. So please, we need to talk about this. So be brave. And this can take a lot of work, particularly working with some cultures where it's considered rude or impolite to challenge. You have to work very hard to change this and get people comfortable, confident to say, no, actually, I think we should do it this way, or I think this is the right figure because. We also value commitment. So commitment is basically you collaborate to create something, therefore you're prepared to fully commit to it. It's no good trying to just say, yeah, okay, whatever, whatever you say, I'll go along with it. I want people to say, I'm committing to this. I'm going to do everything in my power to make this succeed. So if you create a plan or an estimate and you create it collaboratively, that gives you this sense of ownership because you have a part in the discussions to create that piece of work. People should be listening to your concerns and you're part of achieving consensus. And it is about managing the way people engage. So, for example, you will get some people that will often criticize, and that's how they see things. Oh, that'll never work because. And what you have to create is a balanced discussion where people can be creative, they can be constructive, but they can also be critical. And one of the techniques I use a lot is something called a Disney strategy. And you imagine yourself in 3 rooms. And the first room is the creative room where you just come up with ideas. And the second room is the realistic room where you talk about how you could put those ideas into practice. And the third room is the critics room. And you basically, when you're having a discussion, you move from room to room to room. And this is the way they created Disney films. What I like about this is it gives critics, for example, a place, but it stops them carping constantly. So you get a very, very good, well-balanced discussion. And for example, if you've got a lot of experience of something, then you may have a lot of experience of problems. So we need to hear your concerns. We just don't want to hear them constantly. So getting this collaborative working relationship takes work. There are strategies you can do to improve it, but it's an important part of Agile. So if you create a plan or an estimate in this way, it becomes personal. And if it's our plan or our estimate, this has a very, very different feeling compared to being asked to sign up to somebody else's plan. So I've been given somebody else's plan and told this is what I'm delivering to. And sometimes I'll argue, but sometimes I used to just think, well, it's not going to work, but you're absolutely intent on us doing this and you're not listening to me, so I'll just say yes. And that's not what we want in Agile. In Agile, we want focus. We want everybody to be focused, both as individuals and as teams. And the best way to get focus is to create clearly defined and agreed goals, because then you've got something to focus on. So we want the team to have goals, and we want the individuals to have goals as well. So again, one of the things I usually do at the beginning of my transformations is I talk to people about what they do, what they're good at, and I set them targets. And that might be getting certification or becoming a facilitator or looking at different ways of doing things, but getting people so that they focus on knowing what they're trying to achieve. And that's particularly important within a team, because if the team have got different ideas of what the goal is, then it's going to get very messy. So something as simple as clarifying and agreeing with the team what the goal is, writing it up somewhere where it's very visible, is very effective. Practices such as prioritization also help focus. So some of you may have heard of a technique called Moscow, which is something we created in DSDM, or Agile Project Management. And you prioritize with 4 categories. The M, what must be done in this time frame, so what must be done today. The S, what should we do next if time permits. The C, what could we do if things are going well. And the W, what won't be done in this time frame. And getting people to agree on the priorities, making sure that we focus on the musts before we get sidetracked with the shoulds and the coulds. That we don't start doing the won'ts because they look interesting, because they're things we shouldn't be doing. So it gives people a mechanism for a way to focus, and it keeps the team focused on what's important. We want people to be open. So Agile relies very much on people being willing to share information. So you've got a team working together. They've all got different pieces of the jigsaw, and we want everybody to share what they know with others. What I hate to see is the sort of, this is mine, I'm keeping it secret to me. You don't need to know that. But if you want people to share information, firstly and foremost, we need good communication skills. So this is, yes, it's about talking, but it's also equally about listening. And for me, it's also about watching, because you can pick up a lot from body language as well as from what people are saying. And then we need people to be open to evaluating new ideas. So we want people to be thinking. We want people to be considering and understanding what's being talked about, not just switching off. So what you look for in Agile is that teams and individuals will be flexible. In other words, they'll demonstrate an Agile mindset. They don't just come in with a fixed idea. This is my view, this is the answer, and I'm not for changing. You know, this lady is not for changing, is not the right attitude. It's, oh, that's interesting. Now that might work. Let me have a think about this. Or coming up with ideas and having people listening to what you're saying and maybe challenging you, but not in a confrontational way. And the final value is respect. So respect is fundamental to establishing a good team, to establishing effective team behaviors and building successful teams. If there's no respect, then the team won't function. So this is about having respect for other people's skills and their knowledge, respect for differing opinions and viewpoints. Recognizing that, you know, for example, admitting you don't know everything and you shouldn't pretend that you do. And the reality is I've been doing Agile for over 25 years and I'm still learning. And what I like is people keep an open mind and accept that you're never too old to learn. If you don't have respect, then what you find is people within a team will start behaving defensively. You get back covering, you get people making notes or sending emails worded in such a way that you can see they're keeping a record for the future. And when you get these sort of defensive behaviors, then you find that the openness and the honesty just simply don't happen because people are too frightened, they're afraid. And I do a lot of facilitator workshops, and one of my top workshop rules is all views are equal. In other words, if I'm running a workshop, it doesn't matter whether you're the most senior person or the person that joined the company last week. For the purposes of this workshop, everybody's views have equal value. obviously I can't manage what happens outside the workshop, but for example, somebody that joined the company last week, their views might be really useful because they haven't yet been, I was going to say contaminated, but they haven't yet been indoctrinated into the current way of doing things, and they bring fresh ideas. And that has equal value to somebody that's been working in a company for a long time for the purposes of an exploratory workshop. So respect is really important. So we've got courage, commitment, focus, openness, and respect. These are all fundamental to effective teams and effective Agile. So if you want a team to be effective, if you want Agile to be effective, there's a huge emphasis on teams. So successful Agile relies all the time on team members working together, because you bring a variety of skill sets, and we need to be working towards shared goals and shared ways of working. So some years ago, we had an interesting experience. We were running an Agile transformation in a long-established large manufacturing organization in the UK, but actually a global company, and very, very manufacturing focused, and it was a high proportion of very experienced engineers. And when we went in, I got collared by one of them, and he sort of came up to me and said, "So, Barbara, what do you know about manufacturing aircraft engines?" I said, "Absolutely nothing. I was hoping you were going to bring that. What I bring is a knowledge of Agile. So between us, we've got everything we need. But we need to share these skills, so I can help you, but you can help me. But I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in engineering." He was quite surprised. But people sometimes think that I'm, as a coach or a transformation consultant, I'm going to come and do Agile on you. But it's not like that. What I do is I help people do it for themselves. So my skill set is Agile, but I don't ever even think that I can tell somebody how to run an insurance business or a finance organization or manufacturing. That's not what I bring. And it helps to help a team understand who's got what skills. So you respect different skills or different approaches. And I sometimes do things like personality assessments as well. One of the teams I work with, we had one guy in the team, and you know what it's like when you send a joke and you have somebody that replies to that email and tells you why that's not funny. Well, we had one of these guys in the team, and he was very annoying, was very detailed and very particular. And we did a personality assessment, and what it highlighted, which I wasn't surprised, was he was very, very highly monitor evaluator and completer finisher. And I explained to the rest of the team that you needed those skills in the team. It just so happened that all of them sat with Craig. And they felt better about it after that because they actually understood where Craig was coming from. So understanding your team, understanding who brings what, actually helps build a team and get them from through to become a performing team. So collaborative people are fundamental to Agile. And I know in my previous presentation, I touched on the concept of T-shaped people. And the best sort of collaboration is when you've got individuals with T-shaped skills. So that's a sort of a picture of a T-shaped skilled person. And the way it works is you want people that have got subject matter expertise. In other words, this is what I bring to the team. But equally, what you're looking for is an awareness and appreciation of what others bring. So this is the T-shape. So if you get somebody that is an absolute subject matter expert, but is not interested in anyone else or what they're doing, and they don't interact with them, it's very, very difficult to get a functional team. If you get a collection of individuals who are just subject matter experts, you've got a group of people working in parallel streams, but you don't have a team. And some years ago, I did some work with Natural History Museum. And one of the problems we had when they were talking about a team was that you got the individuals in the team and they'd each got their expertise and they're each fighting their own corner, but there wasn't a shared objective, a shared goal. It was almost like a competitive environment, and that doesn't build a healthy team. So I often spend time trying to look at the people that we recruit into Agile, trying to identify the people that are not going to work collaboratively. Not because they can't change, but because they are so fixed in their way of working that it would almost be mental cruelty to expect them to take on a completely different way of working. But in my experience, most people do have the T-shaped skills. There's very, very few that can't develop the understanding of what others bring to the game. So another of the things that's really important to Agile is this concept of empowerment. We need teams, we need individuals to be empowered. This is what works so well. It's something that frightens senior management initially in the early stages, particularly if they don't understand how it works. So the why and how of empowerment. Always before I talk about empowerment, I talk about a caveat. It's a two-sided thing, empowerment. So what we're looking at is not the I can't remember what it was. This was the week that was, but the very famous sketch with John Cleese, Ronnie Barker, and Ronnie Corbett. It's the sort of I look up to him, or in John Cleese's case, I look down on them because I'm more important. That's not empowerment. And empowerment doesn't work if you're running to hand over and the person you're trying to hand over isn't listening or isn't ready or has already left. So that's not what we need. That's not empowerment. That's not a two-sided relationship. What we're looking for is more of this, where as a senior manager, I'm empowering a team, or as a team leader, I'm empowering individuals. I'm handing something over. So the important thing is that empowerment works as a handshake. So empowerment is handed down to the team, to individuals from above. That's the first step. So we need senior management who are comfortable and willing to do this. But on the other side as well, empowerment and the associated responsibility needs to be accepted by the team, by the individuals. So empowerment carries responsibilities. If I'm empowered to make decisions, I take the responsibilities of the decisions I make. Always based on the understanding that I make the best decision I can at that point in time, based on what I know at that point in time. You can't retrospectively start hurling blame for mistaken decisions. So for this to work, if you're empowering somebody or if you're being empowered, people need to be clear what the boundaries are. And with those boundaries, we also need to be very clear how we escalate. And we need to make sure that the escalation processes are in place and they're timely. Because delivering with Agile is all about deliver on time. And time should be treated as very, very precious. We can't afford to lose time. We can't afford to waste time. So if I escalate something and it's urgent, I need to know how quickly I can get a response. So I typically define what the escalation processes are, and we put timeframes on them. So for example, I had somebody who was key to make decisions for me, and he was also key for keeping the payroll running in the organization we were working with. So he couldn't be at the end of the phone, but we agreed some escalation processes, like he'd be available first thing in the morning from 8 to 8:30 because it was normally quiet. He would be available to us Tuesday mornings and Friday afternoons, provided payroll was still running. And if we sent him a message, he would try his best endeavors to get back to us within 20 minutes. So it was very, very clearly written down how we would manage escalating decisions. We also had a fallback if payroll was down. That meant he wouldn't be available to us. Then we had a stand-in that would step in and make the decisions so we could keep moving on. That's empowerment working really, really well. But it is important that people understand that empowerment is not doing whatever you want. It's not a free for all, get out of jail free card. You can do whatever you want. So the first thing is empowerment is based on knowledge. You wouldn't empower somebody who is completely and utterly incompetent. You wouldn't empower, I don't know, a 3-4-year-old child to go out shopping across the main road and bring you something back. So empowerment is about managing what people can and can't do based on what they're competent, their level of knowledge, what they can do effectively. So what we're doing is we're empowering people who are good at their job. And from a, we often talk about delegating authority to the lowest safe level. So what we're trying to do is make sure that the people that are closest to the problem are actually informing the solution. One of the really frustrating things is when you get somebody senior telling you how something should be done, when you know it's probably 20 years since they did that job, and all right, in their head it was done perfectly at the time they did it, but actually it was probably less than perfect and the world's moved on. In my experience, if you talk to the people that are hit by a problem, they've often got very good ways of resolving the solution, resolving the problem. So what we're trying to do is delegate authority to those people that know what they're talking about and are actively involved and current. What we're trying to do is get decisions made rapidly by those with the appropriate knowledge and avoiding the need to escalate everything to get senior management rubber stamping. And this is one of the ways that Agile shortens our communication channels. This is one of the ways that Agile speeds things up. So one of my experiences quite a few years ago now, I was asked to do some work for the Department of Education and Employment, and they wanted to do full Agile. And I said, yeah, that's fine. We can go for that. So what I'm looking for is basically somebody that can be actively involved with the team on a day-to-day basis. And they said, yeah, okay, that's fine. So they sent me an email and it had a list of 30 names in. And I said, no, what I'm looking for is one person that can come into the team and make the day-to-day decisions. They said, oh no, there's more to add to that list. And I said, now hang on, this is a committee. And they said, yes, it meets once a month. So if you want decisions, you would have to escalate to the committee and they'll come back to you with a decision when they've had their meeting. And I had to explain very politely that there is no way that would work in Agile. And then I actually quietly walked away from that assignment because there's no way, if that's the attitude, if everything is a decision made by committees meeting on a monthly basis, there is no way you're going to get any of the benefits of Agile because it's still a committee-driven organization with no empowerment whatsoever. So empowerment is really important, but we need to be very clear what the boundaries are. So for example, as a manager or as a team member, we need to understand what are the acceptable levels of tolerance. So am I allowed to overspend my budget? What is the risk level that's acceptable? I did a project, a piece of work for the Army in Salisbury. It was quite a large project. I was the sort of contract project manager. And when I went in, I said, okay, so, how does this work? And they said, well, you've got a budget of £1 million. I said, okay, that's great. I'm thinking, that's good. They said, the way it works here is that it is expected. It's the norm that you will overspend that by 10%. That's absolutely fine, which I thought was great. Then they said, but Barbara, if you overspend the 10% by 1 penny, then we will no longer underwrite any of it and it's all your responsibility. That's very severe, but absolutely explicit, very, very clear. Another organization, when we were putting together proposals, it was very clear that we had 3 risk levels up to a certain number, risk number. I could authorize that. If it went up by 10, then that had to be authorized by a senior management committee. And if it went up by 20, it could only be authorized by the CEO. Again, very, very clear boundaries to my empowerment. So we need to know what empowerment boundaries are before we can accept the responsibility that we're being given. And that often means asking people the questions, making sure that these boundaries are clearly defined. They can't be subjective, they must be absolutely objective. So people need to be clear what falls within their empowerment and what falls outside their area of expertise when they need to escalate. So using an IT example, what we would say to a team is you are empowered to develop the best solution you can to meet the customer's problem. It must meet corporate standards. It must meet these specific standards for this piece of work. And it must use the technology that's accepted within the business. So, for example, you can't bring in a neat piece of software that you got free with a magazine at the weekend and start developing on it. You can't damage the corporate infrastructure. So it's being very clear that people are empowered to be creative, but even that creativity has some bounds because it has to be a supportable, sustainable solution that doesn't break the rules. Sometimes you do need to challenge the rules, but you can't just break them without asking. So from an empowerment point of view, there are benefits and there are risks to this. So I look at these from 2 points of view, from the team members' point of view, also from the management or the organizational viewpoint. So first of all, from the team members' point of view, the key benefits, it's extremely motivating. If you're empowered, it gives you a much bigger commitment to delivering because now it's personal. I've put this is my estimate. I'm going to make darn sure I get this done. It's much, much higher job satisfaction. And if you look at self-actualization, if you look at something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's the highest level you can get to. Being allowed to be creative and be told you're doing a good job, being recognized for doing a good job is the most motivating you can have. It's great. If you've never been there, trust me, it's a wonderful way to work. The risk is that not everybody wants this. So one of my gigs a couple of years ago, I had a technical guy working on one of my pieces of work, and he was technically brilliant. And I kept trying to encourage him to join in and be empowered and, you know, really engage in this. And he just took me on one side. He said, "Look, Barbara, I'm not interested." He said, "All I want to do is come in, do my job, go home." He said, "I'm not interested in being brilliant. I'm not interested in getting promotion. I just want to come in, do it, enjoy what I do, no more, and then go home." So you can't force empowerment on somebody, you know, if they're sitting in there with their arms folded or their fingers in their ears and they're not listening. From a management or an organizational point of view, benefits, you get faster decision making, you get better decisions because you're getting decisions based on first-hand knowledge of the problem. You get highly motivated people. So allowing your people to make the most of their capabilities. One of the side benefits of that is that it often leads to much better staff retention because people feel motivated, they feel happy in their job. They're allowed to be good at their job. And one of the ways I often describe the difference between a good and a bad process is a bad process is a ceiling and it limits everybody to mediocre. A good process is a safety net. It sits underneath everybody, but it allows your brilliant people to succeed. Empowerment allows brilliant people to succeed, but you've still got the safety net that you're only empowered to the level of your competence. You're not just allowed to be free to do anything, whatever. The risks to empowerment from a management organizational point of view is if you don't get the handshake, then you haven't got empowerment. So it has to be this two-sided relationship between the person that's empowering and the team and the individuals that are taking that empowerment on with the associated responsibilities. But again, if you work in a toxic organization where there's no trust, where there's honesty is not appreciated, then empowerment starts to become very difficult because people are frightened that they're being set up, and yes, it's all right when it's going well, but as soon as it starts to go wrong, then we know we're going to be in trouble. So this builds on the values as well. So good leadership is really important to foster effective teams. So what you're looking for is not this. And I've also seen this sometimes with PMOs who are auditing or managing teams. They start with the expectation that the team are a criminal and they are the police, and they go in expecting the guilty to need beating into submission. This is not a good management style. It doesn't get the best out of people, and it creates this very defensive relationship. So we don't want that. What we want is a much more facilitative and collaborative leadership. Not always Superman, but definitely a team of people who are there to help. So what an agile team is looking for from the leadership is being able to invoke help when you need it. So I sometimes describe my ideal project sponsor. My ideal project sponsor would be a cross between a Rottweiler and a ferret. I want a Rottweiler because I want somebody who will come in and kick open doors that I can't open. And I want somebody with the temperament of a ferret, that when they get their teeth into something, they won't let it go till they've sorted it. That's what Agile needs. We need people to open doors for us when we're hitting things that are stopping us getting what we need, stopping us progressing, on the assumption that the work we're doing is really important and it has value and our time is valuable. So that sort of style gives you the most effective team, and it provokes an environment of confidence and trust so that people are then prepared to be open and honest. If you work in an environment where the messenger is regularly shot, then people are very, very hesitant to admit to problems, and that's less than ideal. So why would you bother to change the way leadership is done? Basically, if you're talking to senior management, it's all about the bottom line. So if you're an organization and you want to be effective, you are going to have to be able to change. You need to change to keep aligned with the way the world is going, because that's the only way you're going to be able to respond and to thrive in the modern world. So you need to be agile. You need to be more flexible than probably you've ever needed to be in the past. And the last year has shown us this, how important flexibility is. So I know a lot of organizations say our people are our most valuable assets, but they don't always treat them that way. And what surprises me is so often the value in the staff is unrealized. Apart from anything else, quite often people that work for you have skills that you don't even know about. And we interview, but we don't find out what else people are capable of. So what else can you do? My background is languages. People often don't ask that, but it can be useful. But you might have somebody that's brilliant at problem solving or analyzing issues or critical thinking. But if people are afraid, if they're stressed, if they're burnt out, then they won't have the emotional energy to be brilliant. And what we want is people to be as brilliant as they can be. And as an organization, everybody benefits. So if people are happy, if they're positive about their work, they're likely to be high performers. So allowing them to do the best job they can do rather than telling them just to do what they're told, everybody wins. Getting a sense of recognition and achievement is a huge motivator. So, for example, for me, the benefit quite often of putting IT and the business together to work together as a collaborative team rather than opponents is everybody wins, because IT start to understand the business start to understand the issues that IT go through. So from a management point of view, this different style of working, allowing people to really do a good job, is a no-cost benefit. So why wouldn't you do it? It costs nothing to value people and let them be good at what they're able to be good at. So people like agile ways of working. I know, I expound agile and say it's absolutely brilliant and everybody loves it. And you're probably sitting there thinking, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But I just thought you might find this interesting. This was, I was facilitating a retrospective for a team, and this was the team and the senior stakeholders, and we ran this one after the first 4 months of agile working. And I'm just facilitating, so I don't have any input. I just write down what people say. So although it's my handwriting, none of these are mine. And it's very, very interesting to see what they came up with. So for example, I pick one or two, the one top right, the ability to resist unrealistic target dates. That takes courage, but they had the ability to do that. We're better prioritized. That keeps us focused. The team feel that they're working at a sustainable pace. So they're not doing superhuman efforts followed by depression and failure and illness followed by superhuman efforts. They're working at a pace that they can keep going week in, week out. They've got a trust in the dates. They're committed to their own estimates. I love that one. People now realize how long stuff takes. You know, doing estimating as a group exercise, you start to understand that you get optimists and you get pessimists. People, the Agile team are working together. It's a cohesiveness. And we're committing from a position of confidence. So all of these highlight the fact that this is Agile working. And this was a team that had been new to Agile. So none of them had had any Agile experience before. And it was a complex project. So clearly it works. And this highlights Agile values in practice. It shows that the team is positive, improved processes, planning and estimating, the ability to deal with the unknown. Again, a very, very important trait in the common world. And having retrospectives like this is a key feedback loop for Agile. Agile is all about do something, look at what you've done, learn from what you've done, do it better next time. So this was the positive sheet. We also had a second sheet, which was things we need to improve. So it wasn't just happy, smiley faces. So the organizational impact behaving differently, there's a knock-on effect on the stakeholders. So I like this Macaulay Culkin picture. It looks just like my son when he was younger. But it's what we're doing with Agile is we're doing things differently. And what we do differently is particularly visible to senior stakeholders, particularly in processes such as planning and reporting. So if you've got senior stakeholders who are used to a traditional style of working, what they're used to is this. Very, very detailed Gantt charts. And these give an impression of confidence and certainty. It may be misguided, but people have the feeling that, for example, I can predict that in 4 months' time we're going to be doing X on Tuesday afternoon. And it also implies that we're not expecting change. And that just doesn't align to the current world. We often talk about this VUCA world. The world is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. 2020 demonstrated that in spades. It was just horrendous. Anybody that laminated a plan in February, March, April, complete waste of time. And if you had a detailed Gantt chart for what you're going to do for 2020, it would just go out the window. We don't work that way. We work differently. This is, people send me these sorts of pictures. We plan differently. So somebody sent me this saying, Barbara, is this your planning? It may be in its extreme example, but we do use Post-it notes for planning. But if we move to reality, this is an example of an Agile plan in reality. They're built collaboratively. They're always created as a team activity. It's not the project manager creates the plan and hands it down. We, the team, including the project manager, create the plan. So everybody buys into it. It's our plan. It's highly visible to anybody who wants to see. So information can be pulled, and it's not always physical. I mean, these days it's more likely to be virtual. But what we like living plans, we update them regularly. So at least every 24 hours, the plan will be updated. Anybody can see where we are as of worst case 24 hours ago. And we adjust our plans constantly to show how we get from here today to the end goal. Because we're never quite where we thought we were going to be. Things are hitting us and we're having to adapt constantly. So this style of plan works much, much better. Yes, have a Gantt chart for critical path analysis, but not to that level of detail. So you can have stage plans in a Gantt chart, but the detailed stuff is done in this style. Reporting traditional. On a traditional project, basically you've got long periods where you've got no proof, so you're reporting into a black hole. So you have phases like, oh, we're halfway through the analysis, we're halfway through the design, or I can't tell you where we are, come back and talk to me later. You know, don't ask me, I'm too busy to tell you how it's going. The problem is that you get subjective reporting. You get the optimist telling you it's going awfully well and the pessimist telling you it's not going very well. But usually we report from an optimistic point of view of, trust me, it's going really well. And then you get projects that have reported 90% complete and then shortly afterwards fail and have got nothing to show for all the effort that's gone into it. It's not traditional's fault, it's the phased approach that means you're working in that style, but it does make reporting difficult. Agile is transparent. So first of all, we have iterative and incremental delivery. We have regular show and tells. We have ongoing business acceptance of requirements. So the progress is based on fact. Yes, I've seen these 15 requirements, they all work, so 15 are banked ready for the future. And they're production ready, even if they haven't got all the stuff wrapped around them yet, they do what we want them to do. So it's a different style. So Agile reporting is transparent, and if we make some small changes, we can get real benefit from this. So for example, if you align your major reporting periods to shortly after the end of a sprint or time box, which is typically every 2 to 3 or 2 to 4 weeks, then you're reporting on what the sprint delivered based on done. So no bluffing, no hiding place. It's not optimistic or pessimistic, it's done. It's not we were really busy, it's what have we banked. And for the purposes of this type of reporting, done is binary. So half done is of no interest, it has no value. We want to know what's done and everything else isn't done and it's still waiting. So it's much better reporting. We do daily stand-ups, sometimes called a daily scrum. And this is a picture of actually one of my teams in Finland. And what we do is we report every day, typically about 15 minutes every day. So what we allow for is 2 minutes per person plus a 2 minutes overhead. So we recommend in Agile, optimum team size is 7 plus or minus 2. So if you've got 7 people, 7 twos are 14 plus 2 minutes, 16 minutes. Reporting, don't want War and Peace, simply answer 3 questions. What have I done in the last 24 hours? What am I going to do in the next 24 hours? What, if anything, is blocking me? So you don't come in with a notebook and go through it. You're often reporting around your board, which is your 2 to 3 week plan, and it's short and to the point. It's a regular opportunity to tweak plans, to share issues, to share answers, to highlight any blockers that need to be escalated. And it's run by the team for the team. So these guys here, the closed circle facing the board, that is the team doing the work, the engine room that are creating the solution. The people stood outside are the observers. Anybody's welcome to observe because they learn from hearing what's going on, but they don't take charge. And you'll notice we very, very deliberately position it so that the team are focused on the board. They're not reporting to the senior management. So it's a very, very effective way of both reporting and tweaking the plans. So reporting from an Agile team members point of view, what you get is honest, untampered reporting. And that's changed from the normal and it can be scary. There's no hiding place because you're reporting on done or not done. So you can't pretend and hope it will sort itself out. And if there's problems, they're highly visible. But what we do is we flag red as a call for help. And what we're saying there is our project's got problems. We don't have the power to resolve this issue. We will fail if we don't get help. So from the management point of view, honest, untampered reporting, equally, it's a change from the norm and it can be scary. It's not what senior management are used to. So one of the things I spend a lot of time doing is explaining to senior management the benefits of this brutally honest style of reporting, because it's different. What we recognize is that the earlier and more openly a problem is highlighted is an advantage, because you've got a lot more options of what you can do. The later you find out, the more limited your choices are. So senior intervention early can make a huge difference. And this quote from George Patton, "The cavalry has arrived. I've been telling everybody, hold on, help is coming." That's what we want when we escalate red. We want management to come in and kick open doors to sort out problems. And transparency underpins agile communication. So from a team member point of view, what we're doing is we're moving from a traditional style of reporting, which is fairly well disguised, you don't feel in the spotlight, to actually very much in the spotlight, very visible, and that is why it's scary. From a management point of view, for those of you that heard me last time, I talked about watermelon projects. It's something I picked up in Australia, which I love. It's the concept that a watermelon project, you're reporting it green on the outside. And the reality is it's actually red on the inside, but nobody wanted to report it red because apparently red is a very unpleasant color. So it's changing the way that we do things. And this can be a problem for senior management because it's not what they're used to. So agile projects are more likely to flag red. And it certainly makes me unpopular. Comments like, "Barbara, why do so many agile projects flag red? Clearly there's a problem with your agile." So an example, we had a large complex project and time was very tight because the deadlines had been committed before we'd even got the team on board. And we were working really hard to meet the deadlines, and we needed a test environment and it wasn't there. So we put the project red, and it was sent back to us saying, "Could you kindly put it amber?" And I said, "No, we're not putting it amber, it's red because there's no test environment." "Yeah, well, other people have that problem." And I said, "Well, sorry, that's up to them. But I'm telling you, this is an absolute blocker. If you don't sort this out, this project's going to fail. It doesn't mean we failed, but without your help, and you're going to have to go and kick quite a few people to sort this, this project is going to fail. Over to you." But it doesn't make you popular. That's easier when you're an external consultant. I just wanted to finish. This is my absolute favorite quote, and I use it a lot. Basically, you're sitting in a dark room. The room is full of tigers. I put the lights on. Please don't blame me or Agile for the tigers. And this is often experienced like the missing test environment. Everybody knew there was a problem. They were living with it. Agile says, "We can't live with that. It needs to be sorted. So please don't blame me for the tigers." Okay, I'll stop sharing and hand back to Kevin. Was it? Yeah.
Yes. Barbara, thank you very much. That's a fascinating insight into Agile from a people perspective. I can see we've got some questions. So folks, if you think of some questions, please add them into the Q&A tab at the bottom. And I will hand over to my colleague Ian now to select the questions and put them to Barbara.
Thanks, Kevin, and thanks, Barbara, for that great presentation. We've got a number of questions that have come in. We'll start with the first one that's coming from Charles Sperry. And I know you covered some of this in your presentation. He asks, is there a role for project or program managers within agile organizations? And if so, what might that revised role resemble? Not the policeman, I guess.
Yeah. I'm going to sound like a politician doing a daily briefing. I'm going to say, absolutely brilliant question, Charles. Absolutely, definitely, yes. And anybody from Agile who tells you there is no role for project managers or program managers does not understand complex corporate world. So there's Agile project management, there's Agile program management, there's Agile portfolio management. So the point about being an Agile project manager is you need to be a more facilitative, collaborative project manager, not a command and control one. But yes, the Agile project manager is focusing on the upwards and outwards communication with the senior stakeholders. And basically, Agile project managers, their role in life, and I upset a lot of them, the role of a project manager for me is like a midwife. Basically, they're delivering projects, they're delivering stuff, but they need to understand they don't own the stuff. So the midwife doesn't own the baby, the project managers don't own the project. So the project managers are responsible for coordinating and getting the delivery out of the door. From the program management point of view, you are still responsible for coordinating the change into life. And if you're a portfolio manager, Agile portfolio manager, you are responsible for making sure that strategically we are working on the right things to deliver the strategy. So absolutely, definitely, yes, but you need to look at things like Agile project management, Agile program management, Agile portfolio management, because if you look at Scrum, Scrum does not understand complex corporate Agile, and it just focuses on team. And if you look at something like SAFe, it just treats program as a large project and project like a big team. So what I can do, if you like, I've got a why Agile project management why is not a contradiction. I've got a white paper that we published on that. If anyone's interested, I can make that available if you want.
That sounds a great answer and offer, Barbara, so thank you for that. The next one comes in from Shan. Where have you seen the best adoption of Agile?
Right. Interestingly, been working very, very hard in this on Agile in the UK for a long time. The best adoption of Agile that I found was the 3 big visits to Australia, because they had such open minds to this. They were amazing. What I've often found in the UK is you come up against, well, we've always done it that way, or we don't want to listen to you. Although, to be fair, in the last 2 or 3 years, and certainly the last year, suddenly everybody wants Agile. But I've spent 20 odd years fighting against the tide, and it seems quite strange suddenly to be very popular and very much in demand and not seen as this mad woman trying to make us do difficult things. The hardest is in very process-driven organizations where the leadership is very controlling, where people are sort of pinned down. It's obviously easiest in the younger organizations where they don't have a lot of legacy. But having said that, I mean, we had some fantastic work with a very long-standing insurance organization, and they were seen as very corporate and very dull and staid, and they were brilliant, absolutely fantastic, but people thought they wouldn't do it. They thought they'd be wouldn't be willing to take it on because they were older and they weren't gung-ho, but actually they were brilliant because they liked the structure of Agile project management. They were scared of trying to do Scrum across the whole organization, but when you explain that that's not what you're doing, you're not saying stop everything you're doing now and just do Agile. So I think the best adoption of Agile is when you explain to people that, for example, I'm not here to tell you how to do your job. I'm here, first of all, to understand what you've got that's good, that you want to keep. And let's see where you've got problems, and let's see where Agile can help. So it's building a collaborative partnership to adopt Agile, compared to the people that come in and tell you how to do it before they've even found out what the problem is.
Thanks, Barbara. Adam Jones asks, do you have any suggestions for virtual tools to facilitate stand-ups and keep the energy high? Very relevant in these days, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing, well, stand-ups shouldn't take ages. So, you know, the energy should be pretty good. Change it round, so don't do the same thing every day. So, for example, what I do with my stand-ups is every day I get a different team member to facilitate it, and I let them make suggestions on how to make it more interesting. So one team, they somebody had to bring a joke of the day, which was sometimes a bit painful. But also you've got electronic whiteboards, for example. But I think people are more used to this style of things now. When you get used to stand-ups, because they're typically only 15 minutes or so, the energy should be fairly high. But it's making sure that people join in and they concentrate. And that's why one of the reasons we always talk about stand-ups is if you're in a room, we make people stand up so that they're uncomfortable and they don't spend ages gossiping, but they stay focused. And what we try and do is get the same energy, even if it's a virtual one. So one of the things I loved about Mars is that they have stand-up desks. So they encourage people not to sit down and work. They've actually got treadmills as well that you can go and work at. And that would be one way of facilitating getting more energy into the stand-up, suggesting that people actually stand up at their desk. That would be fun. But ask the team. You know, if you think it's getting boring or they think it's getting boring, ask them what they think would make it more fun.
Excellent. Thanks. Let's move on, Barbara, to the next question. This is an interesting one. It's coming from an Uju O, who gives you lots of credit for the great presentation, but asks, how do you integrate Agile sprints with companies that produce physical products as opposed to software products where flexibility and revisions can work better within? So let's say an automotive company.
Okay, so this is one of the things where you've got to adapt your Agile to the organization you're working in. So for example, I did a lot of work with Nokia, and Nokia, they were creating software and hardware all across the globe, testing in India, building the panels in China, and we still did sprints, but you had to do a lot more thinking about the integration. So for example, because of the way you had to test things, you were limited how much test as you go you could do. So we had to have a one sprint delay testing for certain elements, because physically you could do some sort of virtual testing, but you had to actually physically have the panel before you could physically test it. So we had to design a process which was slightly different to the norm. It's the same as if you're working in a manufacturing. You can't just change stuff ad hoc. You are much more constrained. So working with the aircraft manufacturing organization, it's safety critical. The flexibility of what you can change was much, much more limited. And it means that you did more work up front than you would normally do, simply because of these constraints, which is why as an Agile consultant, I spend a lot of time in the early stages talking to the organization to understand what constraints they have, and then understand which ones are negotiable and which ones aren't. So for example, if you're audited, if you're regulatory company, if you have regulation against you, there are things that you have to be audited on, but you can't just use the excuse we can't change that because it's regulatory. So for example, if you have to meet a standard, it might be that you can meet a bronze standard, you don't necessarily have to meet the gold standard. So it's about understanding what the constraints are and working out how do you do it. But sprints are fine. The only problem I had with the manufacturing company was that we always recommend that sprints should be 2 to 4 weeks max. And this particular aircraft manufacturing company said, oh, well, Barbara, that won't work because our sprints, the minimum we could have would be 6 months. And I said, no, that's not a sprint. That's an increment, that's a release. So let's talk about this again. But it was very constrained and we had to adapt what we did because of that. And that's the whole point. If you can't be agile when you're being agile, then, you know, give up and go home now.
Thanks, Barbara. The next question is from Andrew, and I guess it's one of the most common ones that anybody that practices Agile gets, is how do you get senior management on board to take part in a more transparent, honest way of working?
Okay. I don't know how many senior management you've got on here. My answer is very, very tactfully. So the first problem I find is that I go in to talk to senior management and I know that they've looked up Agile on Wikipedia 5 minutes before I go in to talk to them and feel that they're an expert. And the first thing I have to do is help reassure them what Agile actually is and what it isn't without exposing any ignorance on their side. So a lot of, I'm sure you know this, but, just to clarify that we're thinking the same way. So changing senior management, it's really about understanding what's important to them, because you wouldn't be doing this if things were going brilliantly. So typically it's understanding what problems you've got, what issues have you got. So is it late delivery? Is it low quality products? Is it missing opportunities? Is it not being able to respond to threats? And then it's being able to focus the benefits of Agile, particular benefits of Agile that will hit the problems that they're hitting, but explaining to them the way it works and what it means to them, but why this is a good thing. But it's quite difficult. This is why quite often it's useful when you can throw somebody external to the wolves. It's quite difficult if you're somebody fairly junior in an organization. And I always smile when you read the definition of Scrum and the definition of a Scrum Master, which is basically a team leader role, is that they will be coaching senior management on how to do Agile. In my experience, that you need more clout. I mean, this is where the grey hairs come in, to be honest. This is where sort of being an external person helps, because you can say, look, I've done this before, I know how this works, I can understand your concerns, this is what will work for you, but this is what I'm looking for you. So helping them to understand that I want this cross between a Rottweiler and a ferret. And I said that to one group that I was spending a day talking to them about Agile. And when I said it, they all looked at one guy in the room. Fortunately, he had a sense of humour. And he appreciated what I was trying to say, that we need senior people that are prepared to step in and take responsibility for helping this work succeed. We want people that care. So as an example, I will not accept a project if there is no sponsor. Because if nobody cares enough to sponsor it, then this has a very low probability of success.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Barbara. The next one, slightly controversial could be, I guess. It's from George, who says that he would love to see a team where everyone would be happy to go on with what they're expert in, but most times he observes, he says, team members taking advantage, doing less and expecting reward for that. And he asked, did you ever encounter this type of behavior in your career, and what's your opinion about it?
Yes, I had a very interesting one. I was doing a new Agile in a new organization. So what they said is, right, we'll do a pilot, and they picked a pilot, and I said, please don't pick an impossible one. We picked an average project, and they said, right, we'll give you a team of average guys, average people. And we did the project, and it was absolutely fantastic. And the team were brilliant, and they surprised themselves and everybody else, and they were fantastic. So the elderly gentleman that owned the company said, okay, that went well. So he said, right, let's see what Agile can really do. I'll give you a team of superstars. And it didn't work. They got big egos, and they were full of themselves, and they weren't so open to learning, and they'd been sitting on their laurels for quite a long time, and actually it exposed that they weren't as good as they thought. It's interesting how rarely we actually put teams together physically with any thought. It's usually who's available and who can spell whatever it is we're working on. I try and spend time understanding the team's behaviors as well. And if you start building people's confidence, then the team will start putting peer pressure on the people that aren't developing, that aren't delivering. And if you're working and promising delivery in a 2 to 3 day time frame, and you fail to deliver, and the team they can see that they're going to fail because you're not doing your bit, they'll kick off about it, even to the point of sort of escalating it to line management, say, look, this just isn't fair. This person isn't doing it, they're just not cutting it. But yes, it does happen. And sometimes you have to accept that it needs dealing with. And interestingly, when I was a manager, I sacked somebody, and somebody said to me, "Oh, call yourself Agile." You know, I thought Agile was about a no blame culture. And I said, yeah, no blame. If you make a mistake, I won't blame you. If you make the same mistake twice, I'm not going to be happy. And if you make the same mistake 3 times, you're taking the mickey. You know, so there is still line management in Agile. It doesn't go away. So, but it's about motivating people with targets they think they can achieve and then pushing them towards getting those.
Thanks, Barbara. The next question is from IZ, but he or she has asked a question about where do they start if they want to introduce Agile into Agile teams into a company. Where do you start? And there's
okay, depending on whether you're a senior manager or not. If you're a senior, well, probably for both actually. What I always suggest is that you do a small piece of work as a pilot, and you set certain objectives for the pilot to prove or disprove. So if you're going to do that, then get some training for the team, find a piece of work that is discrete, not easy, but possibly not business critical unless you've got a coach to support the team. I have done pilots with business critical projects and you get a huge commitment, but if you're doing it internally, start with a project or a piece of work, try it out, make sure you do the retrospectives and learn from it, share what you're learning, and as it starts to improve and go well, then start bragging, start spreading the word, and then maybe do another pilot. And then from that, you might see 2 teams from that team. And then, so that's sort of almost doing Agile from below and building up the capability.
Great advice. There's a couple of questions that have come in about managing larger teams, and particularly those that may be geographically dispersed. How does Agile work for those?
Much better than we used to, obviously, because when I started doing remote working was almost impossible. We didn't have the technology. We have the technology now, but what you get, it depends on your remote working. So if you're remote working, but you're all in, let's say you're all in the UK or all in the US or whatever, that's, at least you've got a shared culture. When you're working remotely across the globe, or even if you're working sort of in London and Newcastle, you get disparities of culture and you have to think about how that's going to work. So one of the difficulties is sharing time, sharing the conversations that you have around the coffee machine. So for me, if you're working with a remote team, I think you've got to think a bit more about your communication strategy. How are we going to do this? What are your expectations? So for example, if people are working from home, you might need to work out what's the best time to do this. So it's no good having your daily scrum, your daily stand up at 8:30 if you've got people that have got to take children to school. So it might be that 11 o'clock is a better time. But it's also keeping in touch with people. So if you're the manager of a team working remotely, you need to be there for them. You need to talk to them about things that aren't work as well, so they feel that they can approach you. You've got to be sympathetic towards them. I started life at F International, which was set up for women coming back into work after they'd had children. And Steve Shirley was a brilliant exponent of this, and you had to be there for the team. You had to understand the team, that they have calls outside work. It's different when you're in an office because you switch in office mode and that's all you do. But it's with remote working, you're judging people by the work they're putting in, not necessarily the hours they're doing it. So things like daily stand-ups help with that, because if you're reporting, if you're getting work done every 2 to 3 days, that helps keep people focused. Large teams, seeing your next question, if you've got large teams, what we would normally suggest is you try and split it up into smaller teams, and then have a scrum of scrums where a representative of each team goes to one after that, where you share between the teams. big
Excellent.
teams don't work, because if you've got a team of 30 and you have a daily stand-up, daily scrum, 30 people times 2 minutes, that's 60 minutes, 62 minutes times 30 people. That's 30 hours you've just used up. That is just not a good use of time, and people don't focus that long anyway.
Thanks, Barbara. I think time is always against us. I think we've got time for just one last question, and this one I'm going to choose is from Peter Wakeling, which says, a history of projects perceived to have failed has led in recent years to increased emphasis on corporate project governance. This leads to tension between agile innovative thinking and governance constraints demanding conformance to specified processes and limited empowerment of project leaders. How do we resolve?
Usually my immediate answer to that is, and how's that working then?
Yeah.
Because it usually isn't. More governance doesn't resolve failure. Having a process that fits, having people committed to making things work, having the sort of the governance attitude of not me police, you criminal, but how can we help? What help do you need? What doors do you need opening? But yes, I accept you will get these agile silly people that tell you that because they're doing agile, they're excused governance. I think they have a note from their mum to say they're excused, which is absolute rubbish. Agile projects are fine with governance, but you do need to ask the right questions. So I was governed by an auditor that came with a traditional question set, and he and I didn't get on very well, and he went off with a nervous breakdown. And then they sent me a sensible one that said, right, you know, what questions should I be asking you? Because if you're governing agile, then please don't come along and say, right, I want a signed off functional specification written in Word, or I want a project plan that looks like a Gantt chart. Because I remember arguing, what is wrong with a photograph of a load of Post-it notes? And telling me you're used to Word is not a sensible answer. If my Post-it notes are achieving the if my Post-it notes are achieving the objective, then that's fine. So often I think with governance, we need to go back and question, what are you trying to achieve? Because if you want a tick box, then fine, I can backdate a form. I can even fax and fiddle my signature on a backdated report, but that doesn't mean it's actually honest. So it's changing people's perceptions. I think the starting point is finding out, what are you trying to prove, and asking, is what you're doing honestly working? Because I reckon it probably isn't.
Thank you, Barbara. I think we'll have to leave it there with all those questions. We have shared your LinkedIn address, by the way, for some people.
That's fine.
If they want to get in touch, I'm sure that will be fine.
I know we had one or two questions after the last one, didn't we? I had a few came in through LinkedIn as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's a shame. I was hoping to answer the one about women in the workplace.
Well, yes, go on then. We'll do it since we got a minute or two left. So.
Well, it gives us an opportunity to be brilliant. But I never want to be taken on or recognised as being a woman in the workplace. I want to be brilliant at being agile. And I think agile gives everybody the ability to be judged equally on being good at your job, no hiding place.
Yeah, and that was from an anonymous attendee.
Attendee, yes.
All right, we must leave it there. Let's hand back to Kevin, and thank you very much again for answering those questions.
So thank you, Barbara. That was an absolutely fascinating presentation, and really appreciate the time that you've taken to pull the material together. I guess the old adage comes to mind: the most important asset are your people, and I think you've really brought that out in your presentation. So once again, thanks for everything.
It's good fun and great questions. Thank you very much, everybody that sent in questions. Really good.
Let's just draw everyone's attention to our next webinar, which will be entitled "Rolling Out Gigabit Connectivity to Up to 8 Million Premises." and that's by Clayton Nash from City Fibre, and that's on Tuesday the 30th of March. So please look out for that. And use our IET community website for further details of that presentation. And also we have a full program this year of webinars, and there are other details of the other webinars, and you can register for those. So finally, on behalf of the IET Anglian Coastal Local Network, thank you all for joining tonight, and thank you to Barbara and to the team who put on tonight's webinar. Very much appreciated. So that concludes the webinar now, and you may disconnect.